smell of burnt rubber and broken glass is something you never forget. It embeds itself somewhere behind your eyes, and for months afterward, every time you close them, you're back there, standing in a parking garage on a Tuesday night, watching someone you love walk away from something they destroyed. My brother didn't run, he walked. That was the part that stayed with me. He didn't panic, didn't hesitate. He just straightened his jacket, checked his phone, and walked toward the elevator like he had somewhere better to be, which, I suppose, he did. He had a meeting the next morning with a venture capital firm who was about to write him a very large check. I stood there in the concrete cold, staring at the crumpled front end of my Subaru pressed into the side of a parked Mercedes, and I did what I always do when my brother is involved in something catastrophic. I waited to be told what to do. My phone buzzed before I could even think to call anyone. It was my mother. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Just, "Don't call the police yet. Your father is on his way." I had driven my brother to his company dinner because his license was suspended, a fact my parents knew, a fact everyone conveniently worked around because my brother was, in their words, in a critical phase. The dinner had an open bar. I had sparkling water. He had whatever was free and plentiful, and at some point during the valet handoff, he decided he wanted to drive us home himself because he knew this garage better than any attendant. I told him no. Twice. He grabbed my keys off the hook while I was in the restroom. By the time I got to the lobby, he was already pulling out of the space. I got in because, what else do you do? Stand in a parking garage alone at 11 at night. He made it approximately 40 feet before he sideswiped a parked car at what felt like full speed, though the scrapes on the concrete said otherwise. The airbag in my car deployed. His side. He walked away without a scratch. I was still buckled into the passenger seat, the seatbelt having done exactly its job across my collarbone and chest, when my father arrived. He didn't ask if I was hurt either. He looked at the damage, looked at my brother leaning against the far wall scrolling through his phone, and looked at me with that particular expression I have spent my entire life trying to prevent. The one that means I need you to be useful right now. "Nora," he said, "that's not my name, that's my mother's name, which tells you something about how that conversation went." He caught himself. "You were driving. It wasn't a question. My brother's name is Philip. He is 31 years old, 4 years older than me, and he has been, in the vocabulary of our family, on the verge of something enormous since approximately the 6th grade. Every decision my parents have ever made has been filtered through the question of whether it might interfere with Philip's trajectory. My college fund was redirected to his first startup. My car, the one currently embedded in a stranger's Mercedes, had been borrowed so many times I kept a log of the mileage, which nobody ever asked to see. I wasn't driving, I said. My father's jaw tightened. He lowered his voice. "Cassidy, listen to me very carefully. That's my name. Cassidy. 27 years old, paralegal, 1-bedroom apartment I could barely afford, and 3 years into paying off the car that my brother had just destroyed. The meeting tomorrow is worth $4 million, my father said. A DUI on top of a suspended license. They'll pull the term sheet. It's over. Everything we have worked for, everything this family has sacrificed." "I haven't sacrificed anything," I said. "He took my keys." My mother appeared from somewhere. She had driven separately, which told me the timeline of calls I wasn't included in. She touched my arm the way she does when she wants me to stop talking. "The other car is empty. No one is hurt. It's just property damage. You're insured. He's not on my insurance. That's something we can sort out later." She said it the way you say, weather permitting, breezy, as if later was a place we could all meet at our convenience. Right now, we just need everyone to be on the same page. Philip hadn't moved from the wall. "You're not even going to say anything?" I asked him. He looked up from his phone. "I appreciate it, Cass." He said it the way you thank someone for holding a door. The worst part, the part I have replayed approximately 4,000 times since, is that I said yes. Not immediately. I argued for a while. My mother cried, which she does strategically and well. My father talked about sacrifice and family and the fact that I was, in his words, not currently in a position of consequence, meaning my career was not the kind of career that a DUI would devastate the way it would Philip's, meaning my life was the more expendable one, meaning I was the logical choice. I blew a 0.01, the breathalyzer the officer administered 40 minutes later. The officer noted as possibly stimulant related and moved on. Nobody pressed it. The other car's owner, a man named something I still can't remember, was reached by phone and was mostly concerned about his weekend plans being disrupted. My father stood 20 feet away talking quietly with Philip while I answered questions I had rehearsed in the 10 minutes between my parents arriving and the police. I said I was driving. I said I misjudged the space. I said I was very sorry. The citation was for reckless driving and failing to maintain control of a vehicle. No DUI. The breathalyzer had cleared me of that, at least. But the reckless driving charge was enough. My insurance rates would spike. My license could be suspended pending a hearing. And my father, satisfied, took Philip home in his car while my mother drove me to mine. She didn't apologize. She told me the family was grateful. I sat in my apartment that night and looked at my ceiling for a long time. The next 2 weeks moved the way bad weeks do, slow when you're inside them, fast in retrospect. Philip got his term sheet. My parents took him to dinner to celebrate a restaurant I had been to once for my birthday years ago. I got a court date, a letter from my insurance company, and a voicemail from my father reminding me not to discuss the details with anyone. My brother texted me once, "You're a real one, sis. I won't forget this." He did not send flowers. He did not offer to pay the deductible. He did not ask how I was. My mother called every few days, not to check in, but to manage me, to make sure I was still on script, still not saying anything to anyone, still willing to be the quiet, cooperative one. She mentioned my rent once. My parents had been co-signing my lease since I moved out, a logistical holdover that I had been meaning to resolve for 2 years. She didn't threaten me directly. She didn't have to. The reminder was enough. I started going through my things at night. This sounds strange, but when you feel your life narrowing to a point, you start taking inventory. I went through my files, my records, my documents, looking for something I had that was mine. Looking for ground. I found it in my work bag, in a pocket I hadn't opened in months. I'm a paralegal. I work for a small firm, 4 attorneys, 2 support staff, the kind of place where you end up doing everything and getting credit for nothing, but where you also learn things. One of the things I learned is that most people have no idea what their devices are recording, syncing, or storing. I know this because I have spent 3 years helping lawyers build cases out of metadata, cloud logs, and the digital exhaust that people leave everywhere without realizing it. I had my work tablet with me the night of the accident. I'd bring it everywhere. Old habit. I'm always on call for filing deadlines. It was in my bag in the back seat when Philip drove into that Mercedes. And because I had set it up to auto-connect to any familiar network and sync continuously to our firm's case management system, a precaution after I lost a document 2 years ago and nearly cost us a deposition, it had done exactly that in the parking garage, which shared a network with the hotel lobby 2 floors up, a network I had connected to 3 months earlier during a client meeting. The tablet had been recording ambient audio for a voice memo app I'd left running from a meeting earlier that day. An app that syncs to cloud storage every 15 minutes if it detects a live connection. The upload timestamp was 11:47 p.m. The accident happened at 11:32. My hands were shaking when I opened the file. I sat at my kitchen table in the dark and I listened. You could hear the impact, a dense metallic crunch, and then Philip saying, "Oh, hell," in a tone that was almost bored. You could hear the car settling. You could hear my door opening, my feet on the concrete. And then, 11 minutes later, clear as a deposition transcript, you could hear my father say, "You were driving. Say you misjudged the space. Do not complicate this." And you could hear me say, "I wasn't." And you could hear my mother say, "Cassidy, please." And you could hear my own voice, small and tired, say, "Fine." I didn't sleep. I thought about what I had. I thought about what it meant. I thought about what it meant. I thought about my lease, my cosign, my father's calm voice reminding me not to discuss the details. I thought about Philip's term sheet and my father's investment in that term sheet and the way my mother had touched my arm. And then I thought about the attorney I work for. Her name is Janet, and she has been practicing family and civil law for 22 years, and she once told me, during a particularly ugly estate case, that the moment you have evidence, you stop being a victim and start being a witness. The distinction matters, she said. A victim waits to be believed. A witness has documentation. I emailed Janet at 4 a.m. Subject line, I need personal advice and I think I need it before Thursday. She called me at 7:15. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time after. Then she said, where is the audio file right now? Cloud storage. Firm server sync. So it's time-stamped, server side, and not on any device your family has access to. Correct. She said, Cassidy, do not touch anything. Do not confront anyone. Do not tell your brother or your parents that this exists. Can you do that? I said yes. She said, I'll make some calls. The next 4 days were the hardest of my life, and not for the reasons I expected. The hard part wasn't the secret. The hard part was sitting through a Sunday family dinner at my parents' house, watching my mother refill Philip's water glass and my father talk about the investment closing and saying nothing, smiling at the right moments, asking about Philip's pitch deck, being the person they had always needed me to be one last time. Philip caught my eye across the table at one point. He gave me a small nod, the kind of nod that says, we're good, right? The kind of nod that assumes yes, because it has always been yes. I smiled back. My court date was a Wednesday morning. Gray sky, the kind of cold that gets into your coat. The courthouse smelled like every courthouse. Floor cleaner and old paperwork and other people's worst days. I sat at the defendant's table with attorney Janet had connected me with, a woman named Ms. Achibe, who had spent 15 years in the DA's office before going private, and who charged a rate that made me briefly nauseous before Janet explained that she was doing this when it cost as a professional courtesy. My parents were in the gallery. Philip was not. He had a meeting. My mother had dressed carefully the way she does when she needs people to see her a certain way. My father sat with his hands folded, looking confident. He had spoken to someone, I'm sure. He always speaks to someone. I'm sure. He always speaks to someone. The prosecutor went through the standard opening: reckless driving, failure to maintain control, the citation details. My father exhaled slowly, like a man watching a play he'd already read. Mrs. Shebe stood up. Your Honor, she said, the defense would like to submit new evidence prior to plea. Specifically, an authenticated audio recording from the night in question, timestamped and server-logged by a third-party cloud system, which establishes that my client was not operating the vehicle at the time of the incident. The prosecutor looked up. My father's exhale stopped. We'd also like to submit, Mrs. Shebe continued, her voice entirely calm, a second recording from the same source, in which the defendant's father explicitly instructs her to falsely report herself as the driver to responding officers, and in which the defendant's clear initial objection is audible before compliance was obtained through financial coercion. My mother made a sound, not loud, just a small, compressed sound like something puncturing. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, looked over the submission. She looked at the prosecutor. Ms. Vance, have you received this? Ms. Vance was already reading from her tablet. Just now, Your Honor. Yes, I'm looking at it. Play it, the judge said. There is something particular about hearing your own voice in a courtroom. It sounds both like you and nothing like you. Too small for the room, too ordinary for the occasion. I heard myself say I wasn't driving. I heard my mother say my name. I heard my own surrender. And then I heard my father's voice very clear saying, if this falls apart, everything falls apart. Do you understand? Everything. The courtroom was quiet. My father stood up in the gallery. This is completely out of context, sir. The judge's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Sit down. He sat. The next 20 minutes were procedural in the way that huge things sometimes are. Forms, requests, the prosecutor conferring quietly with Ms. Ashebe, the judge making notes. The reckless driving charge was dismissed. The judge referred the coercion and false reporting evidence to the DA's office for review of potential obstruction and filing of false report charges against my parents. A warrant for Philip was not issued that morning, but mints were holes. Achebe had, the night before, forwarded the audio to the motor vehicle authority handling his license suspension case, along with documentation that he had been driving on the night in question. I watched my father walk out of the gallery. He didn't look at me. My mother did, briefly. I don't know what I expected to see. I didn't see it. What I felt was not triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I felt like I'd been holding a very heavy thing for a very long time and had finally set it down, and now my arms were just tired. Outside the courthouse, Ms. Achieve shook my hand and told me I had been composed throughout and that composed was exactly right. I went home. I made coffee. I sat with it at my kitchen table, which is small and secondhand, and mine. My phone had 14 texts, not from Philip. He didn't text me for 6 days, and when he did, it was a single line that said, "I never thought you'd actually do it," which I found clarifying, not from my mother, not that day. From my cousin, who had apparently been following our family's group chat implosion in real time and wanted me to know she was available if I needed to talk. From a friend I hadn't spoken to in months who had heard something through someone and was checking in. From Janet, who simply said, "Good," the lease cosign I dealt with 2 weeks later with help from Janet and a raise I asked for and received at work on the basis of having managed a personal legal situation with what my supervising attorney called extraordinary procedural competence. My landlord was accommodating. I qualified on my own income. I stayed in the apartment. My insurance situation resolved when the other vehicle's owner, after learning via his own attorney what had actually transpired, directed his insurance claim toward Philip's suspended license liability rather than mine. That process took longer and involved paperwork I will not describe in detail, but the outcome was that I was removed from financial responsibility. Philip's term sheet closed. I know this because my aunt mentioned it, not to gloat, but because she seemed to think it balanced something. I didn't say what I was thinking. My parents have not apologized. I didn't expect them to. My father sent an email 3 weeks after the courthouse, formal and brief, suggesting that I had misunderstood the situation and that when emotions settled, there would be an opportunity to discuss it. I didn't respond. My mother called in February and talked for 20 minutes about Philip's apartment renovation before mentioning at the end that she hoped I was doing well. I said I was. I meant it, which surprised me. I think about the version of that night where I didn't have the tablet, where there was no open hotel network, no autosync, no running app, where it was just my word against my family's, and my family had a lawyer on retainer and a very compelling story about a daughter under stress. I think about how easily that version ends differently, how many times it has ended differently for people in that exact position. I don't have a tidy conclusion for you. I'm not estranged, but I am not close, which is a category my family doesn't quite have a word for yet. I see them at Christmas. I bring a dish. I leave when I'm ready to leave. I still drive a Subaru, a different one, older, with 80,000 miles on it. I bought it myself, full price, no help from anyone. When I drive it, I feel something that takes me a while to name every time. I think it's just the ordinary feeling of going somewhere you chose in something that's yours. It turns out that's enough. I've thought a lot about the word replaceable. My mother said it like it was a fact, the way you'd say the weather. You're a paralegal. You're replaceable. And the thing is, I understood what she meant. She wasn't talking about my worth as a person. She was talking about my worth as a person. She was talking about the math. Philip's deal was worth $4 million. My clean record was worth considerably less in the currency they were calculating in. What they never considered was that I had spent 3 years learning exactly how permanent digital things are. How a file, once synced, doesn't care who has the flash drive. How a timestamp on a server somewhere doesn't negotiate. My father understood leverage. He understood money and boardrooms and the particular art of making someone feel small enough to agree. What he did not understand was that the same professional world he dismissed me for working in had given me a set of tools he couldn't see coming. That's not luck. That's what happens when someone spends years doing unglamorous, careful work and actually pays attention. Philip had the funding and the pitch deck and the varsity jacket equivalent of adulthood. I had 3 years of watching attorneys build airtight cases out of the quiet, overlooked things people leave behind without realizing it. There's something I want to say about the choice I made in that parking garage. I said yes. I want to be honest about that. I said yes because I was tired and scared, and my mother was crying, and my father was using the voice he reserves for closing arguments. I said yes because the version of my life they could take away felt very large and very real in that moment. I don't think that makes me weak. I think it makes me someone who was in an impossible position and chose survival over principle for about 45 minutes. What I did next is the part I'm proud of. I didn't burn everything down out of anger. I didn't call my brother screaming. I didn't post anything, didn't threaten anyone, didn't make a single dramatic move. I went home, I found what I had. I called someone I trusted, and I let the process work. That's the discipline part. The part that doesn't feel heroic but actually is. Sitting through a family dinner and saying nothing, waiting. Trusting that having the right thing was enough, as long as I didn't squander it. My father's mistake was thinking that the power he had over my rent and my cosign and my phone bill was the whole picture. He had spent so long being the one who defined the terms that he couldn't imagine I had any terms of my own. People who use financial control as a substitute for relationship tend to miscalculate that way. They mistake dependence for loyalty, and those are not the same thing at all. Philip got his term sheet. I think about that sometimes. I think about what it means that the deal closed, that the money moved, that the machinery of his life kept running. And I've decided it doesn't mean what it might seem to mean. What happened to my parents is still working its way through a legal process I'm not following closely. What happened to me is that I qualified for my own lease, got a raise, and bought a used Subaru with 80,000 miles on it that I drive wherever I want. The life my family threatened to take from me turned out to be a life I could build myself. That's the thing about being told you're replaceable. Sometimes you find out they were accidentally right, just not in the way they meant.